Ethan Caldwell was a man who had it all, or so it seemed. He lived in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, drove luxury cars, and owned businesses that churned out profits like clockwork. But beneath the polished exterior, Ethan's life was far from perfect. His relentless pursuit of success had cost him dearly. Friends drifted away over the years, family ties grew cold, and love? That was something he didn't even think about anymore. All he cared about was work. On a bitterly cold December night, Ethan found himself stuck in yet another late business meeting. The deal on the table was bigger than anything he'd ever handled before, but as the hours dragged on, his mind began to wander. Maybe it was the exhaustion or just the monotony of his lifestyle, but for the first time in years, Ethan felt a pang of emptiness. Still, he pushed those thoughts aside. Success came at a price, and Ethan wasn't one to back down. As the meeting finally wrapped up close to midnight, Ethan stepped out into the freezing air. Snowflakes swirled around him, painting the streets white. It was beautiful, but also treacherous. Ethan climbed into his sleek black car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The roads were slick with ice, and visibility was poor, but Ethan didn't think twice. He was used to taking risks. The drive home should have taken 30 minutes, but tonight, fate had other plans. About halfway through the journey, Ethan approached a winding mountain road notorious for its sharp turns. Normally, he avoided this route, but traffic delays forced him to take it. As he navigated the narrow path, the weather worsened. The wind howled, and the snow fell heavier, almost blinding him. Suddenly, his tires lost traction on a patch of black ice. The car spun wildly out of control, crashing through the guardrail and tumbling down the steep slope below. Everything happened in slow motion. Glass shattered, metal screeched, and darkness swallowed Ethan whole. When the car finally came to rest at the bottom of the ravine, silence enveloped the scene. For what felt like an eternity, there was no movement. No sound, just the soft crunch of falling snowflakes hitting the wreckage. Hours passed before help arrived. Emergency responders worked tirelessly to extract Ethan from the crumpled vehicle. Miraculously, he was still alive, though barely breathing. They quickly assessed his injuries: internal bleeding, broken ribs, and a concussion. Every second counted if they wanted to save him. While stabilizing him, paramedics noticed something strange inside the car: a woman's purse wedged between the seats. Inside, they found identification papers belonging to someone named Claire Monroe. But where was Claire? There was no sign of her anywhere near the crash site. Had she walked away? Was she injured elsewhere? Or worse, confused but focused on saving Ethan's life, the paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher and rushed him to the nearest hospital. Doctors sprang into action, performing emergency surgery to repair the damage done to his body. Meanwhile, the mystery of Claire Monroe lingered unanswered. Who was she, and why did her belongings end up in Ethan's car? Little did anyone know, this enigma would soon lead to revelations that would change Ethan's life forever. For now, though, all attention was on keeping him alive. As surgeons worked tirelessly in the operating room, nurses whispered among themselves about the peculiar circumstances surrounding the crash. One thing was certain: whoever Claire Monroe was, her presence or absence was central to the story. Unfolding before them, by the time dawn broke, Ethan remained unconscious, his fate hanging precariously in the balance. Outside his hospital room, investigators pored over the details of the accident, determined to uncover the truth. Somewhere out there, Claire Monroe held answers. But finding her wouldn't be easy. And when they did, nothing could prepare Ethan or anyone else for the secrets she carried. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan remained trapped in a limbo between life and death. The hospital room became his world, a place of beeping machines, sterile smells, and hushed voices. Nurses came and went, adjusting 4 lines and checking monitors, while doctors hovered over him during rounds, exchanging concerned glances. His body was healing slowly, but his mind stayed locked away in the shadows of unconsciousness. Finally, one morning, something shifted. A flicker of movement caught the nurse's eye as Ethan's fingers twitched ever so slightly. Moments later, his eyelids fluttered open, revealing dull, unfocused eyes that struggled to adjust to the harsh fluorescent light above. For the first time in weeks, Ethan Caldwell was awake. Double quotes, Mr. Caldwell? A voice called softly from beside him. It belonged to Dr. Patel, the lead physician overseeing his recovery. "Can you hear me?" Ethan groaned, his throat dry and scratchy. He tried to speak, but only a raspy sound escaped his lips. The doctor quickly poured water into a small cup and held it to his mouth with a straw. After a few sips, Ethan managed to croak out a single word. "Where?" "You're in the hospital," Dr. Patel explained gently. "You were in a serious car accident. Do you remember anything about it?" Ethan frowned, his brow furrowing as he searched his foggy memory. Flashes of snow, spinning tires, and shattering glass danced at the edges of his mind, but nothing clear emerged. Shaking his head weakly, he muttered, "No, I don't." The doctor nodded understandingly. "It's okay. You've been through a lot. But let me tell you this, you're incredibly lucky to be alive." Ethan stared up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the situation. Lucky? How could he feel lucky when everything felt so broken? His chest ached with every shallow breath, and his body felt like it weighed a ton. Still, he knew better than to argue. Instead, he asked the question burning in his mind. "What happened?" Dr. Patel hesitated for a moment before answering. "From what we understand, your wife saved you." "My wife?" Ethan repeated, his voice cracking. Confusion clouded his face. "I don't have a wife." The doctor looked equally perplexed, glancing down at the clipboard in his hands. "According to our records and the information provided by the police, you were traveling with your spouse. Her name is Claire Monroe. She called emergency services after the crash and stayed with you until help arrived. Without her quick actions, you might not have survived." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A wife? Claire Monroe? The name meant nothing to him. He had no recollection of anyone fitting that description in his life. Could it be some kind of mistake? Or worse, was someone playing a cruel joke on him? "I don't know her," Ethan said firmly, though exhaustion made his words sound weaker than he intended. "I've never met her before." Dr. Patel frowned, clearly unsettled by this revelation. "That's odd. When paramedics arrived at the scene, they found her purse in your car. And according to dispatch, she identified herself as your wife over the phone. Are you sure you don't recognize the name?" Ethan shook his head again, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm telling you, I've never heard of her. Who is she? Why would she say she's my wife?" The doctor didn't have an answer. All he could do was assure Ethan that they'd look into the matter further. But even as the conversation ended, Ethan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in his gut. Something wasn't right. This mysterious woman, Claire Monroe, had somehow inserted herself into his story, and now she was gone without a trace. Over the next few days, Ethan's condition improved enough for him to sit up in bed and engage more actively with his staff. Nurses brought meals, physical therapists helped him regain strength, and visitors occasionally stopped by to check on him. Yet, none of them could provide answers about Claire. Even the police reports offered little clarity. They confirmed that a woman matching Claire's description had indeed been present at the crash site, but beyond that, details were scarce. Frustrated and desperate for answers, Ethan began piecing together fragments of his memory. Bits and pieces of the night came back to him, The blinding snowstorm, the icy road, the terrifying moment when his car careened off the edge. But there was no sign of Claire in those memories. If she really had been there, why couldn't he recall her? One afternoon, a detective assigned to the case paid Ethan a visit. Detective Harris carried a folder filled with notes and photos related to the accident. As he flipped through the pages, Ethan leaned forward, eager for any clues that might shed light on the mystery. "This is the purse we found in your vehicle," Harris said, pointing to a photo of a simple leather bag lying amidst twisted metal and shattered glass. "Inside, we discovered identification belonging to Claire Monroe. Does this mean anything to you?" Ethan studied the image carefully, hoping something would click. But the name still rang hollow. "No," he admitted. Reluctantly, "Nothing." Harris sighed, closing the folder. "We've been trying to locate Ms. Monroe, but so far, we haven't had much luck. She doesn't appear to live locally, and her trail seems to vanish shortly after the accident. Whatever her connection to you is, she's keeping it well hidden." Ethan sank back against his pillows, overwhelmed by the mounting questions. Who was this woman who claimed to be his wife? Why had she disappeared? And most importantly, why did she risk her own safety to save him? As the days passed, Ethan grew increasingly restless. Being cooped up in the hospital gave him too much time to think, and his thoughts kept circling back to Claire. Was she a good Samaritan who happened to stumble upon the crash? Or was there something more sinister at play? Every possibility seemed crazier than the last dot despite his doubts and fears. One thing was undeniable. Claire Monroe had played a pivotal role in saving his life. Whether she was friend or foe, hero or imposter, Ethan knew he needed to find her. Only then could he begin to unravel the truth behind the tangled web of events that led to his near-death experience and maybe, just maybe, discover something about himself along the way. Ethan's determination to uncover the truth about Claire Monroe grew stronger with each passing day. The hospital walls, once a source of comfort as he recovered, now felt suffocating. His mind raced with unanswered questions. Who was she? Why? Had she claimed to be his wife? And why did she vanish without a trace after saving his life? These thoughts consumed him, leaving little room for rest or peace. Once doctors cleared him to leave the hospital, Ethan wasted no time diving into the mystery. He hired a team of private investigators, sparing no expense to track down Claire. At first, the search yielded little more than dead ends. Claire Monroe seemed to have disappeared off the face of the earth. But Ethan wasn't about to give up. If anything, the lack of progress only fueled his resolve. Weeks later, one of the investigators finally returned with a promising lead. They discovered that Claire had worked as a nurse at a small clinic in a neighboring town. However, she had abruptly quit her job shortly before the accident and relocated without explanation. Her coworkers described her as quiet and reserved, someone who kept to herself. One colleague mentioned that Claire often spoke fondly of her late fiancé man named Evan, but never offered any details beyond that. The mention of Evan sent a jolt through Ethan. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. Was this another clue connecting Claire to him? Or was it just another piece of her mysterious past? Armed with this new information, Ethan decided to take matters into his own hands. He couldn't rely solely on others to solve the puzzle. He needed answers, and he needed them now. With the help of the investigators, he traced Claire's movements to a quiet coastal town several hours away. It was a picturesque place, small, serene, and far removed from the chaos of city life. Ethan wondered if Claire had chosen it deliberately, seeking refuge from whatever demons haunted her. When Ethan arrived in the town, he felt out of place. The bustling energy of urban life was nowhere to be found here. Instead, there was an almost hypnotic calmness with waves lapping gently against the shore and seagulls crying overhead. He checked into a modest inn near the beach and began asking around about Claire. Locals were friendly but tight-lipped, offering vague responses when pressed about newcomers. Still, Ethan persisted, showing her photo to shopkeepers, cafe owners, and anyone else who might recognize her. It didn't take long for someone to point him in the right direction. An elderly woman working at a flower stand remembered seeing Claire walking along the beach every evening. "She keeps to herself," the woman said, adjusting her scarf against the ocean breeze. "But she seems kind enough. Always stops to say hello." With renewed hope, Ethan headed toward the beach, scanning the horizon for any sign of her. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden hues across the water, he spotted her. She was sitting on a weathered bench overlooking the waves. Bundled in a thick sweater, her hair blowing loosely in the wind. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, unsure how to approach her. This was the woman who had saved his life, and yet she remained a complete stranger. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward. "Claire?" he called out cautiously. She turned her head, startled by the sound of his voice. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed quickly by apprehension. Slowly, she rose to her feet, clutching her coat tightly around her. "You're awake," she said softly, her tone tinged with both relief and unease. "Yes, I'm awake," Ethan replied, stepping closer, "and I have so many questions." Claire nodded, glancing briefly at the ground before meeting his gaze. "I figured you would." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the waves filled the silence between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Ethan broke it. "Why did you lie? Why did you tell everyone you were my wife?" Claire sighed deeply, as if bracing herself for what she was about to say. "Because it was the fastest way to ensure you got the care you needed. I didn't know what else to do." "That doesn't explain everything," Ethan pressed. "Who are you? How do you know me? And why did you save me?" Claire hesitated, her expression softening as memories surfaced. "I don't know you not personally, anyway, but I knew your brother." Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Brother? He hadn't thought about his twin in years. Their relationship had been strained since childhood, torn apart by jealousy, rivalry, and misunderstandings. Eventually, they stopped speaking altogether. Ethan had convinced himself that he didn't need anyone, that success and independence were all that mattered. But hearing Claire mention his brother brought back a flood of emotions he'd buried long ago. "Evan," Claire continued, her voice trembling slightly. "That's his name. We were engaged to be married." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "Engaged? To Evan?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, but he died in a car accident just weeks before our wedding. It shattered me. Afterward, I left everything behind: my job, my home, even my old identity. I needed a fresh start, somewhere I could heal." Ethan's mind reeled. He had known about Evan's death, of course, but not the details. News of the engagement came as a shock. Why hadn't Evan told him? Had their estrangement run so deep that even something as significant as love had gone unshared? "I didn't realize," Ethan began, his voice trailing off. "I didn't know he was engaged." Claire gave a sad smile. "He probably wanted to tell you, but things between you two, they weren't good, were they?" "No," Ethan admitted quietly. "They weren't." Claire paused, letting the weight of his admission sink in. Then she continued, her tone softer now. "The night of your accident, I recognized you immediately. You look exactly like him. Same face, same build, it was uncanny. When I saw your car go off the road, I knew I had to help. It wasn't just because you resembled Evan. It was because I owed it to him. Saving you felt like the last thing I could do for him." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, raw emotion spilling out. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by the depth of her pain and his own guilt. He had spent years shutting people out, prioritizing work over relationships. Now, standing face to face with this woman who carried the ghost of his brother, he realized how much he had lost. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. For not being there for Evan, for not knowing about you, for doubting your intentions." Claire shook her head, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her sweater. "You don't owe me an apology. I lied about being your wife, remember? That wasn't fair to you either." Ethan managed a faint smile. "Maybe we're even then." They shared a quiet laugh, the tension easing slightly. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, Ethan felt a sense of clarity. Claire wasn't just some random stranger who happened to save his life. She was a link to his past, a reminder of the family he had pushed away. And perhaps she was also a chance to rebuild, to reconnect with the parts of himself he had long ignored. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan extended his hand. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for saving me, for sharing your story, for giving me a second chance." Claire accepted his hand, her grip firm despite the vulnerability in her eyes. "You're welcome," she replied simply. In that moment, standing together on the edge of the ocean, they both felt a glimmer of hope. Their lives had collided under tragic circumstances, but maybe, just maybe, they could find healing in each other. Ethan and Claire's conversation on the beach marked the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives. After years of isolation, Ethan finally felt like he wasn't alone anymore. For Claire, meeting Ethan had stirred up emotions she thought she'd buried forever. Their bond was fragile, built on shared grief and unanswered questions, but it was real, and it gave them something neither had expected: hope. Over the next few weeks, Ethan made frequent trips to the coastal town to visit Claire. At first, their meetings were awkward. They tiptoed around sensitive topics, unsure how much to share or how deeply to dig into each other's pasts. But as time went on, they grew more comfortable. Conversations flowed naturally, and laughter began to replace the heaviness that once hung between them. One evening, as they sat together on the same weathered bench where they'd first spoken, Claire opened up about Evan. "He was different from you," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not better or worse, just different. He had this warmth about him, this ability to make anyone feel seen and valued. Even when things got tough, he never stopped believing in people." Ethan listened intently, his chest tightening with regret. He had spent so many years competing with Evan, resenting him for being everything Ethan wasn't: charismatic, empathetic, loved. Now hearing Claire describe him, Ethan realized how much he had misunderstood his twin. Evan hadn't been his rival. He had been his mirror, reflecting all the qualities Ethan had suppressed in pursuit of success. "Do you think he would have forgiven me?" Ethan asked suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant, as if afraid of the answer. Claire turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "I think Evan forgave everyone, even those who didn't deserve it. That's just who he was. But forgiveness isn't something you wait for, it's something you give yourself." Her words lingered in the air, sinking deep into Ethan's heart. He had carried guilt for years, not just over his strained relationship with Evan, but over the choices he'd made in life. Choices that pushed away friends, family, and opportunities for connection. For the first time, he understood that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about letting go of its hold on the present. As their friendship deepened, Claire introduced Ethan to the simple joys of her quiet life by the sea. She took him on long walks along the shore, teaching him how to spot dolphins playing in the waves. She showed him her favorite spots, a hidden cove where the tide pools teemed with tiny crabs, a cozy cafe run by an elderly couple who always greeted her like family. Slowly, Ethan began to see the beauty in slowing down, in appreciating moments, rather than chasing milestones. But Claire wasn't the only one helping Ethan rediscover himself. In return, Ethan encouraged Claire to confront the pain she had been running from. One afternoon, as they sat sipping coffee at the cafe, he gently broached the subject. "You left everything behind after Evan died," he said. "Do you ever miss it, your old life?" Claire hesitated, stirring her cup absent-mindedly. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it hurt too much to stay. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of him, the house we were going to share, the wedding invitations we never sent. Starting over here, it helped me breathe again." "That makes sense," Ethan replied. "But don't you think Evan would want you to keep living fully? Not just surviving, but thriving?" His question caught her off guard. It was something she had avoided thinking about for years. Thriving meant facing the world head-on, embracing risks and possibilities, even love. And while Claire had grown fond of Ethan, the idea of opening her heart again terrified her. What if she lost someone else? What if the pain became unbearable? "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she confessed quietly. "Loving someone, it's beautiful, but it's also risky. You put your whole self out there, and sometimes it gets shattered." Ethan nodded, understanding her fear all too well. "I used to think avoiding risk was the safest way to live. But lately, I've realized that playing it safe is its own kind of risk. You might avoid pain, but you also miss out on meaning, on connection, on love." They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. The cafe buzzed around them, laughter from nearby tables, the clinking of cups against saucers, but their world felt still, suspended in a moment of profound understanding. Neither of them could change the past, but together they were learning how to move forward. As weeks turned into months, Ethan and Claire continued to support each other in ways neither had anticipated. Ethan helped Claire reconnect with her passion for nursing, encouraging her to volunteer at a local clinic. Seeing her light up as she cared for others reminded him of the importance of purpose beyond profit. Meanwhile, Claire challenged Ethan to step away from his relentless work ethic and embrace hobbies he hadn't touched since childhood: painting, hiking, even cooking. Their bond grew stronger with every passing day, but it wasn't without challenges. There were moments when old wounds resurfaced, threatening to pull them apart. Once, during a heated argument about Evan, Ethan blurted out, "Why did he tell you about us?" "Why didn't he tell me about you?" Claire froze, her face pale. "Because he was scared," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Scared of rejection, scared of making things worse. Just like you were." The truth hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He had always blamed Evan for shutting him out, but in reality, they had both been guilty of the same thing: fear. Fear of vulnerability, of rejection, of loss. Acknowledging this didn't erase the pain, but it brought a measure of peace. Together they vowed to break the cycle, to build a relationship rooted in honesty and trust. By the time summer rolled around, Ethan had decided to sell his penthouse in the city and buy a small cottage near Claire's home. It wasn't an easy decision. He had poured decades of effort into building his empire, but he knew it was the right one. Success no longer defined him, relationships did. And Claire, despite her fears, found herself falling for him, not as a replacement for Evan, but as someone entirely unique and irreplaceable. One evening, as they strolled along the beach hand in hand, Ethan stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "for saving me, not just my life, but my soul. I don't know where I'd be without you. Claire smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. We saved each other, she replied simply. In that moment, standing under a sky painted with stars, they both knew they had found something rare and precious. Love born from loss, transformed by grace, and destined to endure. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as perfect individuals, but as flawed, hopeful humans determined to make the most of the second chances life had given them. Ethan and Claire's lives became intertwined in ways neither of them could have predicted. The coastal town, once a place of solitude for Claire, transformed into a shared sanctuary where they both found healing and purpose. Their days were filled with simple joys: morning walks on the beach, cooking meals together, and tending to Ethan's new garden, which he had started as a way to reconnect with nature. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly alive, no longer burdened by the relentless grind of his old life. And Claire, who had spent so long running from her past, finally began to feel at peace. But their journey wasn't without its challenges. Old wounds still surfaced occasionally, reminders of the pain they had endured. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Ethan's cottage watching the sun dip below the horizon, Claire turned to him with a hesitant look in her eyes. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if Evan hadn't died?" she asked. Softly. Ethan paused, caught off guard by the question. It was something he had thought about often, but never dared to voice aloud. I don't know, he admitted after a moment. Maybe we would have fixed things between us. Maybe we wouldn't have. But I do know this: if he hadn't been taken away, I wouldn't be here with you now, and that scares me. Claire reached out, placing her hand gently on his. It's okay to be scared, she said. Losing someone you love is one of the hardest things anyone can go through. But it doesn't mean you stop living. Loving again isn't a betrayal, it's a gift. Her words resonated deeply with Ethan. He realized that while losing Evan had left an indelible mark on his life, it had also paved the way for unexpected blessings. Meeting Claire had forced him to confront his fears, to let go of the bitterness and regret that had weighed him down for so long. In doing so, he had discovered a kind of love he hadn't known was possible: quiet, steady, and built on mutual understanding. As the months passed, Ethan and Claire continued to grow closer. They celebrated small victories, a successful harvest. From Ethan's garden, a heartfelt thank you note from a patient Claire had helped at the clinic, and leaned on each other during difficult times. When storms rolled in, flooding parts of the town, they worked side by side with neighbors to clean up and rebuild. Through it all, their bond only strengthened, proving that love isn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about showing up day after day, even when life gets messy. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan woke up early, unable to shake the excitement bubbling inside him. Today was special not because of any particular occasion, but because he had something planned that he hoped would bring them even closer. After making coffee, he slipped outside, leaving Claire still asleep in bed. He returned an hour later carrying a wooden box, its surface smooth and polished. "What's this?" Claire asked curiously as he placed the box on the kitchen table. "Open it," Ethan urged, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Inside the box was a collection of mementos photos, letters, trinkets all tied to memories of Evan. There were pictures of him as a child, laughing alongside Ethan, and notes scribbled in his handwriting. Claire gasped, tears welling in her eyes as she sifted through the items. "Where did you find these?" "I went back to the city last week," Ethan explained. "I cleaned out my parents' old house, the one Evan and I grew up in. I figured it was time to face some of those ghosts. These belong to him, but I want you to have them. You deserve to keep a piece of him close." Claire hugged the box tightly, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "This means more to me than you'll ever know." Later that day, they visited a quiet spot on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, a place Claire had always loved. Together, they scattered a handful of Evan's ashes, which she had kept since his passing, letting the wind carry them out to sea. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with both sorrow and gratitude. Saying goodbye didn't erase the pain of losing him, but it allowed them to honor his memory in a way that felt meaningful and hold out as winter approached. Ethan and Claire decided to host a small gathering at the cottage to celebrate the holidays. Friends from the town joined them, filling the cozy space with laughter and warmth. For Ethan, it was a stark contrast to the lonely Christmases he used to spend holed up in his penthouse, working late into the night. This year, surrounded by people who cared about him, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in decades. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks lit up the sky over the ocean, Ethan pulled Claire aside. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his tone serious yet tender. "You've given me so much a second chance, a reason to live fully. I don't want to take another step without you by my side." Claire's breath caught in her throat as Ethan knelt down, pulling a ring from his pocket. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. For a moment, Claire was speechless. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant booms of fireworks. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding, held the following spring, was a modest affair attended by close friends and neighbors. The ceremony took place on the beach, with the waves serving as a backdrop to their vows, as they exchanged rings and promised to cherish each other through every season of life. It was clear to everyone present that their love was extraordinary, not because it was dramatic or flawless, but because it was real. Born from loss, nurtured through pain, and strengthened by trust, it stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the years that followed, Ethan and Claire built a life rich with meaning and connection. They traveled together, explored new hobbies, and welcomed stray animals into their home, creating a family of their own. Though they never forgot Evan, his memory became a source of comfort rather than sorrow, a reminder of the love that had brought them together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Claire leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. "Do you think Evan would approve of us?" she asked quietly. Ethan smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "I think he'd be happy," he replied. "Not because of who we are, but because of how far we've come. We didn't just survive, we thrived. And that's something worth celebrating." As the stars began to twinkle above them, Ethan and Claire sat in silence, content in the knowledge that their love was a beacon of hope, not just for themselves, but for anyone who believed in the power of second chances. Life had thrown them curveballs, tested their strength, and forced them to confront their deepest fears. But through it all, they had found each other, and in doing so, they had discovered the true meaning of love.